morning, everyone.
Good morning. It's great to be here in Michigan at this Rotary World Peace Conference. As Jennifer mentioned, unfortunately, Rotary President John Germ is not able to join us this morning, but I'm delighted to be able to be here to speak in his stead. I'd like to thank Convener Ashish Sharkar, Co-Convener Rosemary Rowney, and the Rotary Club Ann Arbor for the terrific work they've done to put on such an outstanding conference. Dr. Schlissel, thank you very much for your tremendous words, framing words for this conference, and congratulations for all the things that the university is doing to promote peace around the world. Now, being here brings me not just personal pride, as I grew up in Hamtramck and in Warren, not far from here, but also pride in the ability of the organization I serve, Rotary International, to bring together such a diverse audience in perspectives, experiences, and professions. Because this diversity reflects the central themes which I anticipate we shall hear about from our other keynote speakers. That peace is not an abstract concept. It's not an abstract matter pursued by a few lone individuals. It's not, in the words of Nobel laureate Jody Williams, a utopian vision, but rather a responsibility that must be worked for each and every day, a responsibility which belongs to all of us. I think it's also fitting that this conference takes place here in Ann Arbor for another reason. For the steps to achieve peace can be found in very unexpected places. As Dr. Schlissel just mentioned, on April 12, 1955, Dr. Thomas Francis, Jr., director of the Polio Vaccine Evaluation Center at the University of Michigan School of Public Health, announced to the world that the Salk polio vaccine was up to 90% effective in preventing polio. Imagine that, the largest medical field trial ever conducted in human history, with over 1.8 million children for a new vaccine that many thought would never work. And here, as Dr. Schlissel again mentioned, just a few steps from where we are gathered now, Dr. Francis made the announcement of a scientific triumph against a deadly disease. Now you may ask, what does polio eradication have to do with peace? Well, it actually has a great deal to do with peace. Because after that announcement in 1955, the medical community had an effective tool against a disease that endangered literally millions and millions of children. But it takes more than a vaccine to eradicate a disease. So Rotary and its partners formed the largest ever public-private partnership for public health, the Global Polio Eradication Initiative. And with the help of most of the world's governments and millions of volunteers, we vaccinated over 2.5 billion children against polio. And we've reduced the global polio caseload from around 385 cases in 25 countries when our Polio Plus program began back in 1985 to fewer than 40 children last year in just 3 countries, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Nigeria. Now we will end polio. And when we do, it will be a triumph not only for public health, but also for the cause of peace. For as we know from another keynote speaker with expert knowledge of development and health, Professor Jeffrey Sachs, if we can protect children from deadly diseases, they have a better chance at living productive, healthy lives and rise up out of poverty. And if we can do this, then governments will spend less on lost productivity and pandemics and foster economies that are more resilient to external shocks, more conducive to sustainable growth. In fact, the eradication of polio proves that we can pursue development despite ongoing conflicts. It proves that if we ensure that local communities and leaders have a central role in implementing any initiative, that even the reality of civil wars or terrorism cannot stand in the path of humanitarian advances. And this progress for public health is also relevant to peace because it shows the world that we can do what we can do when nations large and small, when non-governmental organization groups such as Rotary, together with the private sector, with citizens and other civil society actors, get together to form a partnership to make a lasting difference. And this is the type of partnership that we will need to emulate to engage with many other pressing global challenges. Again, in the words of Professor Williams, and again, sorry, Jody, I hope I'm not reading your whole speech here. This type of partnership is a new superpower in the post-Cold War world. So while I'm immensely proud that this is a Rotary conference, I'm also proud that this conference is for those outside of Rotary who also want to make a difference. Perhaps the friendships formed here will form tomorrow's new transformative partnerships for peace and for stability. And when we attempt to form those partnerships, we'll have to ask ourselves broader questions about the state of peace today. And this conference will offer some answers to questions such as, what is the state of peace today? What does it take to make peace and to sustain it? And what's the role of civil society in these processes? Now, at first glance, if we try to answer that first question, in other words, what is the state of peace today, it may seem a little bleak. In 2014 alone, 180,000 people were killed in internal conflicts, a number 3.5 times higher than just 4 years earlier in 2010. The latest Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugee Statistics estimate that over 65 million people are now either refugees or internally displaced because of conflict and violence, the highest number since the end of World War II. Climate change is a massive threat to human development and is undermining the international community's effort to eradicate extreme poverty, according to the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. Around 70% of disasters are now climate-related, up from around 50% from 2 decades ago. And the cost of responding to disasters has risen tenfold since 1992 and 2008. However, looking at measures of human development, despite the tremendous progress we've made over the last 30 years in improving the standard of living of hundreds of millions of people in developing nations, we still face some worrying figures. 196 million people still live in extreme poverty. More than 230 million children are growing up in countries plagued by war. 124 million are prevented from getting an education. And despite the incredible advances in medicine, more than 3 million people continue to die of preventable disease each and every year. So we see a world torn by violence, deepening income inequality, rising pollution in the developing world, increasing severe weather events, increasing water stress, and rising geostrategic competition. Nevertheless, I believe that there is great cause for optimism. And I'm optimistic because today you all have gathered here in Ann Arbor. All of you who've gathered here want to do something about our most serious humanitarian problems. And in doing so, you have 2 vital elements available to you to take effective action. First, you have a target. In fact, many targets provided by the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. Why are these goals relevant? Well, from ending poverty and hunger to ensuring inclusive education for all, reducing inequality and achieving sustainable economic development, these goals define our path to a better world. Second, you also have the resources and belief to pursue those goals. As our academic panelists and our peace scholars know, we now have new tools at our disposal to measure and implement long-term sustainable interventions to build more peaceful societies. Now, one of these tools, such as the Global Peace Index, which has been devised by one of Rotary's newest partners, the Institute for Economics and Peace, tells us through analysis of empirical data, not through anecdote, not through stories, but through empirical data, that there are concrete interventions that we can undertake to build the optimal conditions for peace. Now, the work we do at Rotary, not only in peace and conflict resolution, but also in water and sanitation and disease prevention, maternal and child health, community development and literacy, is directly and empirically related to building these optimal conditions. But we must use these new tools to further refine our efforts to ensure that our projects are sustainable, scalable, and produce the maximum possible social impact. Let's take a look at Michigan, for example, in light of this broader definition of peaceful, inclusive societies, resilient to shocks and to downturns. In 2013, Rotary volunteers in Detroit decided to do something about underserved communities in their hometown, which was reeling from economic crisis. And so they initiated a program called Launch Detroit to support and develop entrepreneurs and small businesses in the Detroit region by providing access to business loans, business development services, and networking opportunities. Levi Johnson was one of those entrepreneurs. He was laid off from his job on a public school board due to cuts in 2010. His grandfather was a pitmaster in Tennessee, and Levi had a natural flair for barbecue sauces, but was unsure of how to manufacture it in larger quantities. And the existing small business development programs in the area had steep entry fees or required classes during the workday. So Levi heard about Launch Detroit at a community kitchen, and he applied. And his application was accepted. And with a small initial loan and the mentorship benefits of the program, his business is now thriving in the Great Lakes region, with plans to obtain USDA approval and serve 60 stores in the near future. And so it's innovative programs such as Launch Detroit that are popping up in cities all over the United States and elsewhere. And they demonstrate a clear role for civil society in helping communities recover from domestic or international turmoil. Now, if we think about the second question, what does it take to make peace and to sustain it? We might think of some of the grand diplomatic treaties of the recent past. Skillful diplomacy does seem to be an instrument in modern, groundbreaking peace agreements. Consider, for example, the work of Richard Holbrooke, President Clinton's special envoy for Bosnia, in the diplomatic negotiations between the leaders of Bosnia, Croatia, and Serbia in the 1990s. Or even the 37 visits to Northern Ireland that Tony Blair made in preparation of the Good Friday Agreement to end the terrible troubles in Northern Ireland. But these traditional grand diplomatic treaties are increasingly hard to pull off in the context of globalized political or ideological movements and the interests of non-state actors. For example, the conflict of Syria. The conflict in Syria is just one example of this new complexity. As a result, keeping the peace and allowing it to transform from the absence of direct violence in a society into a positive form of peace, which creates a society that becomes resilient to internal and external shocks, is an entirely different challenge that, in the best scenario, takes decades to achieve. So if the Richard Holbrookes of the world are becoming scarcer and more disempowered, who then can step into the breach and speak for those least able to defend themselves in the face of economic strife or physical conflict and create the conditions for peace? In my view, civil society, organizations such as Rotary, are ideally placed to respond to this challenge. Because it's here where the most sustainable progress can be made, as most civil society organizations are firmly embedded within the local populace and really have local ownership. In short, all of us gathered here today are the unofficial diplomats and peace builders of our age. So when you build a system from clean water, you are a peace builder. When you help out a young student struggling to graduate, you are a peace builder. When you launch any project to support education, health, or economic development in your local community or elsewhere, you are building the optimal conditions for positive peace. In other words, we have every reason to be optimistic, because peacemaking is everyone's responsibility, and we can work toward peace by ensuring that we participate in different ways in the events that shape our livelihoods and the lives of others. So enjoy the conference, bring your best ideas to the table, form the partnerships that make an impact, and know that with all the talent and resources at your disposal, we can pursue a more peaceful and just world. Thank you very much.